What happened to kids taking BMX bike rides that cross towns and sometimes even state lines? What happened to their playing street hockey way past dinner time? What happened to being forced to stay inside, being a type of punishment? I'm sure for some children this is still the experience. For others, though, in a world that seems increasingly predatory, parents opt to keep them closer to home. Then again, there are those parents who see cyberspace as the even graver risk. Amid the complexities of this time, how can parents build resilience in their kids? Well, today's guest, Dr. Joel Warsh, says parents can start by trusting themselves more. He's a pediatrician in LA and a father of two, dealing daily with the modern presenting challenges facing parents. Now we'll look at how parents can put more trust in their own intuition over the bulk of parenting advice flooding the airwaves. We'll cover fostering resilience from time outdoors and low-sugar diets to setting solid boundaries. And we'll look at striking the balance between old-school, authoritative parenting and the gentle parenting philosophy that's currently in vogue. Welcome to Vital Signs, where we learn how to get healthy from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendon Fallon. Dr. Warsh, fantastic to have you join us on Vital Signs again.
Thanks for having me back.
When I hear this term resilience, to bring in a cinematic reference, the first thing that comes to mind is Rocky VI, and that line, it's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and get back up again. Is that roughly in the ballpark of what we're talking about, do you think?
I think so. I mean, resilience is such an important aspect of our health. It's the ability to handle whatever comes your way. I feel like modern parents sometimes don't realize that it's more about resiliency than it is about perfection, because there's no such thing really as perfection. A parent often feels like their kid should never get sick, right? And in my world, and that's just not realistic. I mean, kids get sick and there's no way to completely protect them. I'm not some magical doctor with a magical pill that means your kid's never going to get a cold. If they go to daycare, they're going to get colds. I mean, that's just how it is. But resilience is to be the ability to handle those things as it comes your way and to manage them and to support their bodies in a way that they can get through it easily, simply, and stronger on the other side. And so that to me is resilience, really the ability to handle what comes your way, as opposed to, I guess perfection in terms of like never getting sick, never having a problem. That's not the real world. We have issues and we have to deal with them.
On that topic, I know that you've spoken quite a bit about parents' intuition, and that's something you try to foster in parents, to really trust themselves. And like, you've got this, it's in you to know how to handle these situations. How does intuition, would you say, factor into fostering a child's resilience for parents?
I think it not only fosters a child's resilience, but it fosters your parenting resilience. Again, there's no perfect parenting, right? There's no such thing. We feel like we need to know how to do everything. We feel like there's just one way, and that's certainly not true. You have two kids, and you see that one thing works for one kid and one works for the other. So the reality of understanding that your intuition is what's important, caring is what's important, being there for your kids is what's important. I think that really shifts the focus from the stress to, all right, I'm going to figure this out as it comes. It's important to get information. I feel like there's so much information overload. Sometimes parents don't know what to trust, but that's where your gut comes in. That's where your intuition comes in. Stepping back and realizing, well, parents have been doing this forever. They didn't have Google before and they figured it out. Very, very, very few things are an emergency. And so you don't have to always get it exactly, air quotes, correct the first time. You see what works, you figure it out. And what resilient parenting is looking at your kids, watching your kids, figuring out what works for them, trying things. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then you make changes until you figure out what works best. And that, to me, is the way that we should be parenting, and the way that we can decrease stress and decrease all the noise, because there's so much noise. Everybody's telling us what to do. And it's nearly impossible to know what's right for your kid unless you dig inside and say, okay, here's what I feel like is right for my kid. I know my kid best. This is what I think. And you might not always be right, but you're usually going to be right. You know your kid really well.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, with so much, as you say, so much information, this information overload, and combined with the general pressures of our time, I think it's a case of stepping back from that, I imagine, to the best degree you can, to allow that intuition to come through. And as you say, we've been parenting since time began, so we must have been getting something right without all these different technology. On that, when I think about like my childhood, I was all over the neighborhood. I was into other neighborhoods. I'd meet one kid and he'd become my best friend for the day. We'd get into scraps with the kids from the neighboring school. It was kind of dangerous looking back, but I think that fostered some level of resilience in me. But when I go out, in my own neighborhood now, I don't see kids playing that much outside. I don't know whether it's just my perception or whether things have changed and kids just don't seem to get that kind of exposure anymore. How important is that? If it is being lost, is there a way to kind of imitate it or replicate it?
I don't think it's just your perception. I think that's certainly happening. We have, I would say, an epidemic of kids not being in nature and being outside. I think that's a big issue that is something that every generation before the last maybe decade or 2 decades, they were outside all the time. I mean, back in the day, you're out farming or you're out helping or you're out playing. And even when we were kids, just like you said, we were outside a lot more. We were playing. I think the fears about being outside and kids getting taken and predators and all those things was lower. I mean, there certainly were, but I just don't think it was as big a concern. Maybe that's more because of social media, more because we see things. I think that's one big issue. And then you mix in the fact that we have all this technology, so we have a lot more that people can do inside, especially as kids get older. They can be on their screens or on their computer, their movies and TV and video games and all of these things that we had a little bit of it when we were growing up, but certainly not what they have today. And so you have this mixture where we're seeing kids inside more, we're seeing less community support, we're seeing more anxiety around being outside and letting your kids roam and be free, and so that leads to kids that are exercise deprived and sunlight deprived, and we're seeing it. I mean, we have vitamin D deficiency everywhere. Basically, everybody's vitamin D deficient. No one's getting enough exercise, or very few people are, and I think that's a huge concern. It's a very different challenge than for our parents. Our parents' generation, or when we were kids, it was just normal. I mean, kids would go outside, everyone was outside, and that's what you would do. Now it's not really an option for a lot of people. So like you said, I think you do have to work that in. I think that has to be something that we're conscious of, especially with the younger kids, that we have to schedule that in. We have to make sure that it happens. You don't necessarily have to let your kid just go roam free anywhere. I mean, you can do that if you want to, but it's not necessarily the world that we live in today. But you certainly can make sure that they're going to the playground every day, that they're going to the park, you're going out in nature, you're going on hikes, you're setting up play dates with them, you're going to areas where they're outside. I think we just have to schedule that in. It has to be a part of our thought, which maybe it was just more natural for our parents and our grandparents, so they didn't have to really think about it. It was just what happens. Like, go outside and play, I'll see you at dinner. Now that's not the way that it is. So I think we have to understand that touching nature, touching the dirt, being outside in the sunlight, that is a part of our kids' health, and we need to make sure they're getting that daily. And in some areas, it's not even that easy because it could be cold, it could be snowy, so you really have to focus on what you can do when you can do it.
We'll hear more from Dr. Warsh in just a moment. I hope that you're enjoying Vital Signs. I'm Brendon Fallon. To embark with you on this journey to higher states of health is to enact my deepest passion. And seeing that we're all in this together, please be sure to share your experience and what you've learned. What's working for you as a parent? How do you keep yourself resilient? We'd love to hear about it. You can go to epochtv.com and find Vital Signs in the Talk Shows tab to leave your comments. Also, to get notice of new Vital Signs videos, follow me at Vital Signs Brendon on Instagram and see Vital Signs on X. So that kind of outdoor exploration, adventure culture isn't quite there to the same extent for kids as it was before, so I guess parents with some determination can bring that in to some degree. At the same time, I wonder, with the kind of landscape that kids are confronted with nowadays, the kind of technology that's out there, I mean, even the kind of cartoons that they're watching, it seems you need a certain sophistication to get the themes and the humor. I wonder if just getting out there and getting their hands dirty is enough to prepare them for the new frontier that they're facing.
I think it's hard because I would think that in every generation, we'd always have these issues. There's always the new fears of the day. There's always things that are changing. And so you're not really sure what the future holds for our kids because we don't know it, right? We know what we grew up in, and then we know the world now, and we're like, okay, it's so different. How is it going to be for our kids? And I think you have to hold hope that it's going to be wonderful for them too. But certainly there are new challenges, and I think we have to face those as we come. And that goes back to kind of the first question of, you have to trust your intuition, because there's no guidebook for the new problems that come. If we have new issues with screens or things that are changing, you have to do what makes sense. And sometimes you just have to go back to basics and be like, well, our kids need to be outside. They need to be playing. So I have to figure out how to make that happen. And that obviously depends on where you live, and your situation is going to be different for everybody. Some people live in the inner city. Some people live in more rural areas. So it's easier for some people and not as easy for others. But also, if you prioritize it, there are a lot of parents that are saying, well, okay, look, I think these things are important. You got to go to college, and these are the most important things. We need all these extracurriculars, and maybe I don't believe in that as much anymore. So I'm going to move somewhere more rural. I'm going to move back with my family. I'm going to move to an area where they have schools, and there's more outdoor play. I mean, these are things that some parents prioritize, and it just comes back to what you prioritize. I don't think it's wrong or right. I just think that we have to acknowledge that these things are important, and we're always important in our health. And we are seeing such a chronic disease epidemic that we have to, I think, take a pause and say, okay, what are the things that we're doing much better from 100 years ago? And what are some of the things that we've changed? And obviously, we're living longer than we did hundreds of years ago. So not everything we've done in modern medicine and health is bad. We're living past 40, but we are seeing life expectancy go back down a little bit. We're seeing chronic disease rates go up. So some of the things that we've done in the last few decades obviously is not the best for our long-term health and certainly for chronic disease. And I would say that one of those big things is movement. And we have traded movement for screens, and we've traded outdoor time for indoor time, and we traded walking for being in a car. And there are pluses and minuses to everything, but we've moved so far towards convenience that we've lost the necessity of movement and sweating and detoxification, which these things are important. The sunlight is important for our health. Our vitamin D is important, and we don't prioritize that anymore in any way. And so I think with what we're seeing, it's important just to talk about these things so parents can be reminded, like, this is important. So schedule it in, have it as part of your life. I know we're all busy, but we need this for our health.
One thing that you touched on there, Dr. Warsh, is like the kind of fear that parents might have about what's out there, predators and that kind of thing. When we spoke last time, we were talking about toxins in food. How do you get a child to eat what's healthy for them? And you talked about modeling. Like one of the best ways is for the parent themselves to be healthy and model that behavior. In terms of resilience, I wonder if parents are kind of affected by like that kind of fear, for example, of predators and in general are struggling with their own resilience. How can they kind of foster that in children?
The first step, I think, is if you are nervous about something, get the facts. Like, try to figure out what the actual details are so you can have an understanding of that. Things like predators, as far as I know, most of those statistics are down over the years. I mean, we hear about it a lot more, but certainly overall things are safer. I mean, some things are safer, some things are not. But I think that we get a skewed version because we hear the worst case scenario, and obviously it still happens. But I think as far as I've ever seen, most of the numbers on those things are actually far down from what they used to be. So I think that's one good thing, because sometimes we have a skewed perception of the world based on social media, and getting a more realistic perception can be really helpful. And our stress levels are seen by our kids, and they kind of take that in. So I think, yeah, you have to focus on yourself too. One thing that parents are very commonly not so great at is focusing on themselves, right? I mean, it's important to focus on your kids, but also the most important thing you can do for them is to take care of yourself too. And, if you're always stressed, if you're nervous, if you need to support yourself, like, you need to do that. If you need to get therapy, go get therapy. If you aren't eating healthy, I think we got to be eating healthy. We have to model these things. You can't expect your kid who's 8 to go out in nature and go on hikes without you, right? Like, it's not going to happen. You got to do it too. So you have to show them, you reading labels. You have to show them caring about health. You have to show them caring about mental health. Like, these are things that are modeled and that you foster over time, not over one day. But I think as a family, it can be built. And our goal, of course, is not to force them to do these things, is to teach them why they're useful and helpful, so that way they do them themselves in their life moving forward. And I do have hope, and I am encouraged that health is back in the conversation. I mean, it became political. I don't think it's political, but I'm glad that it was this year, because I think that's brought it to the forefront, and people are talking about our health again and where we are in terms of our chronic disease. And you don't have to agree with everything RFK says, or everything the HHS says, or everything the CDC says. You don't have to agree with everything, but I think that at least the mere fact that we're talking about it is a good thing. And I want it on the top of people's minds, because it has to be. We are now in a world that does not care about your health in any way. It cares about money, and corporations don't care about your health at all. And that's okay. Their job is to make money. So we have to remember that and then build health back into our world. I think you can much more quickly make changes in your family, like doing things together and getting outside and going for walks and changing what we eat. And that will get you a long way.
I saw in a previous interview that you did, in terms of a child's health, you identified a number of different factors. And you said that, correct me if I'm wrong, but the toxicity and diet you would class as the main factors in determining a child's health. And I know you've recently published a book, Between a Shot and a Hard Place. Do you want to speak a little bit about the focus of that and how that would factor into, I don't know if it factors into mental resilience, but I guess resilience in general?
My first book was Parenting at Your Child's Pace, and that was more, general, I think is maybe even more relevant to this conversation. The new book is Between a Shot and a Hard Place. That's about vaccines, and it's about the vaccine conversation. And for me, I'm not against vaccines. I'm really frustrated with the conversation around it these days, and it seems that you're either pro or anti. There's no discussion, there's no nuance, and I think we need to have that. And I think where this really does factor into this conversation is the fact that we're seemingly so focused on vaccines and medications in the modern medical paradigm and treatments, as opposed to focus on prevention and lifestyle factors and health and wellness. And you are not healthy because you get a vaccine. You're healthy because you live healthy. A vaccine can prevent an infection, but it doesn't make you healthy. And we see discussion all the time on the media about measles, right? And MMR and measles vaccine, and get your measles vaccine. And during COVID, it was like, all right, get your COVID vaccine. You got to get your COVID vaccine. It's the only thing that we heard talked about, even though what should have been talked about much more is our overall health. Because we know, certainly during COVID, what was the biggest risk factor? It was being unhealthy in general. It was having multiple comorbidities. It was not getting sunlight, not having vitamin D. Like, these were the important factors, but you barely ever heard that. What you heard is get your vaccine. And that's where nuanced conversation needs to come in, because we don't want anybody to get measles. We don't want anyone to die of measles. But the way that you protect yourself is to be healthy from all disease. That is how you protect yourself from disease. There are many more things than we have vaccines. And even if you're going to get a vaccine, how do you decrease your risk to have a reaction? It's to have a healthy immune system. It's to make sure we're getting the nutrients that we need. It's to decrease our stress. And these things obviously affect our bodies and our health. And whether you're getting a vaccine or not, our health, our general health, is what is most important for being resilient from all conditions, all disease. And I think we need as much focus on prevention as we are in treatment. I'm very happy we have medications. I'm very happy that we could treat things that we never could before. There's a lot of great things in modern medicine, but we're so focused on that. And we have to move that pendulum back to the middle and talk about medications and treatments equally with prevention and lifestyle, because we've absolutely failed at the prevention and lifestyle side of this discussion, and it has to be brought back, because it doesn't matter. You can give 1,000,000 vaccines. Like, think about a fish. You could give a fish 10,000 vaccines, but if the water is polluted, they're not going to live, right? So it's the same thing. You can give somebody 10,000 vaccines, but if they don't eat healthy, it doesn't make any difference.
And the circumstances of the pandemic, as an example, I mean, those were really bucking against the opportunity to live in a more healthy way. I mean, with the kind of lockdown measures we saw in different places, and the children having to rely on social media to attend classes, not being able to go and play outside often, so being more inclined to use technology. This, as a specific risk factor, I guess you could say, the screen time. You've talked about parents using their intuition as a guidance for them with these things. Is there a general rule of thumb that you'd say as far as how to regulate a child's screen time from an early age?
Yeah, I think it's a little different for young kids and older kids. I think that for young kids, they really don't need a lot of screens. I don't think that we should be focused on zero screens. I think that's impossible, in modern day society. I mean, if you want to live outside of the city, fine. And if you want to do zero screens, great. But for most people, they're on their phones, they're watching things. So their kids are going to see some level of screens. I think if you're using it very minimally, you're using it for educational tools, if you're using it on trips, traveling, long car rides, that kind of thing, that's not what worries me so much. All of us in general watched some cartoons when we were little. Like that, I don't think that's the biggest issue. I think it's the many hours and the reliance on it where we're running into an issue. I think that especially when we're talking about older kids, we're running into a huge issue where kids are on screens 7 to 9 hours a day on average, and those numbers are absurd and ridiculous, because it's not about the screen time. It's about what you're not doing. If you're on a screen for 9 hours a day, you're not outside, you're not socializing, you're not moving. And that is a huge concern for your health. And then, of course, you get into the mental health aspect of being on the computer, but that's a whole other side. Just very basically, if you're on your computer all day, you're not doing anything else. You're not moving. You're not exercising. You're not socializing. And we were never built to do that. That's not a healthy way to live. And we have to get back to, okay, you want to do your homework on the computer? Fine. You want to watch half an hour of TV? Okay. But 9 hours is ridiculous, and we have to start to move that back. And I think for a parent, the goal needs to be to start to just minimize this back to a more reasonable number, whatever the minimum is that they can do. And we don't have to, I think, fear screens. I don't think we have to like go back to 0 screens. I don't think that's happening. We're going to have screens. So I think we want to do it intelligently, and we want to monitor it, and we want to make sure that our kids are using the screens as minimally as reasonable.
When we're talking about mental resilience, what would you see as main signs that a child is struggling in that respect?
From a medical perspective, usually as the kids get older, you start to see changes in their behavior. So mood shifts, withdrawal, difficulty with sleep, appetite changes, random complaints, stomach aches, these kind of things. So often you see behavior changes. That's usually the first sign. Like they're not wanting to do the activities they used to want to do. They're in their room longer and longer. That's often the first signs that we see.
You've spoken a lot about diet in the past. How much do you think diet would factor into a child's mental health?
Well, I think, of course, it factors in. I think it's one of the major factors. You can't take diet or any of these things outside of our... mental health is our health. It's all connected, and our gut is connected to our brain. So I think it's really impossible to say like how much is connected. I think it's just connected. Like these two things are one and the same. And if you're not feeding your body healthy food, if you're not giving it the nutrients and the energy that it needs, your brain's not going to function optimally. And I would think that the worse that you eat, the worse your brain's going to function, the harder it's going to be to concentrate, the harder it's going to be to focus, the harder it's going to be to get the tasks that you need to get done complete. And you're going to eat a lot of sugar, well, you're going to get sugar crashes. If you're going to eat a lot of ultra processed foods, you're not going to feel good. Your stomach's going to hurt. You're going to be lethargic. Any study I've ever seen on depression, anxiety, mood, exercise and diet always beat out medications, and again, it's not against medication. Sometimes you need it in an emergent situation, but in the long term, regular exercise and healthy diet get you farther than any antidepressant does. Some people need both, and some people can be very supportive. So I'm not against antidepressants, but we know this from the research. We know that it does better. So you have to focus back on these things. We have to get moving. We have to detoxify. These are the things that help our body to have the neurochemistry that it needs to function optimally. And if you're not providing it with that, you're not giving it a chance to be successful. It's hard enough to not be stressed in the world as it is. So if you're not providing your body the foundation it needs to potentially be successful, then you don't have a chance.
Yeah, as you say, that this does come through. I've seen that myself in studies in mental health. The exercise, especially, coming through as such a big factor in countering depression. There's this trend at the moment toward gentle parenting, I guess, which is the antithesis of more authoritative parenting, which would favor things like the positive negative reinforcement. Would you say that there is a particular parenting style or parenting approach that better positions a child to be mentally resilient?
Yeah, I think this is something that we know pretty well from research in science, like psychiatry research from years ago. This isn't new information. It's just kind of interesting that it's come back into discussion more recently because of gentle parenting. I mean, we go back to when maybe even our grandparents' age, even some of our parents, like it was very authoritarian. Like you said, authoritarian meaning like my way or the highway, spanking, you do what I say or you're in trouble. Like that was kind of the way that it was for many, many years for most families. And I think with the younger generation now, we've seen a shift and kind of a swing to the other end. People were spanked and people were upset with that, and they felt like they were forced to do things they didn't want to do. And so that shifted the paradigm almost to the other end, which is the gentle parenting movement, which is kind of like let them do whatever. And sometimes, and that was never even the intention of true gentle parenting. I mean, gentle parenting was always meant to have some boundaries, but just, be a little bit more gentle with it and not so restrictive. But I think that the wording's not maybe that great, and it kind of got taken into this world where it's like, yeah, just go do whatever. We'll leave you to your own devices. No boundaries. Boundaries are bad. And let's let our kids just figure it out on their own, and we'll kind of be there to support whatever they want. And nothing in the research has ever shown that to be good either. Extremes are almost never good. It's somewhere in the middle. It's nuanced. And if you go back to like the original research and the naming of it, you have the authoritative parenting. So it's kind of in the middle where you're not overbearing, but you do have boundaries. And kids need boundaries. They need reasonable boundaries. We need to help them and support them. They don't know where their boundaries are, and kids do thrive much more if they have reasonable boundaries that are supportive. So you don't just want to let them hit some other kid. You want to stop them from hitting that kid and teach them why. You don't necessarily need to spank them or put them in timeout, but we do need to help shape them into the human beings that we want them to be and give them the support that they look for and they thrive. And that comes from reasonable boundaries based on age and based on the situation. And that's going to be different in every situation. But gentle parenting also doesn't work very well. You just have kids that don't have boundaries, and those are the kids that are running around and causing a muck in the restaurant, and the parents are just kind of watching them and laughing, and that's not good either, I think.
How do you negotiate that line, I guess, between giving the child the space to make their own mistakes and kind of learn from them, which I gather is a mechanism in resilience, and then protecting them from getting damaged from everything that's out there? And
there's no simple answer to that question. I think that's where parenting comes in, and that's where figuring out the appropriate boundaries, that part of that, the appropriate boundaries, it's hard, and you may not know, and that's where it's kind of trial and error, and you may have to see. But you're right, like you do have to give them some space to make mistakes. Boundaries doesn't mean that you don't let them make mistakes. We need to celebrate mistakes as lessons. We need to teach them things. We need to give them space within reason. But that's where that parenting comes in. Like, you want to give them a boundary to not run in the road when they're a toddler, right? And you don't want that mistake to be them running in the road and getting hit by a car. So you want that boundary to be before that point, but you can have a boundary to get them, they run a little bit closer, they're going towards the car, you're teaching them. Like that's where it's like you want to set boundaries, but you don't want them to be overbearing. You want them to learn, but you also don't want that mistake to be so severe. So we want to praise their effort. We don't need them to be perfect, but we want to have reasonable boundaries and guidelines depending on what the situation is. And that's going to be different for every age, for every child, for every situation. It's going to change as they get older. And our job is to kind of scaffold around them and figure out where those boundaries need to be so we can provide them, I guess, the most support with the least intervention, but also keeping them safe. And that is going to be something that you have to figure out as a parent as you go. And then there's no magic to that because it's always changing, it's always different, and it's very specific to your kid.
Dr. Warsh gives tips on fostering self-esteem in children and on how parents can take better care of themselves in just a moment. First, though, how do our levels of the feel-good hormone dopamine affect our attention and influence ADHD? Here's a quick look at my interview with psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen.
Why do people jump out of perfectly good airplane shape? You have to ask yourself that question. They're always seeking more dopamine. We all have only so much store of dopamine available. People who have ADHD actually have less. They can be conflict seeking. They like poke at other people and they play this game I call Let's Have a Problem. ADHD is a very common but increasing problem. Probably half of the children we see and maybe a quarter of the adults.
We know that caffeine can raise dopamine levels, which would in turn improve focus, including for people with ADHD. How do you rate caffeine as an overall positive or an overall negative entity? And to subscribe for full access to our ever-expanding insights on fine-tuning your health, just hit the big red button below. One thing that I've personally identified and I've seen with children and adults widely is the role of self-esteem in building and being a part of mental resilience, and how identifying a talent or an ability that you have, how powerful that is in that respect. Is there a way that parents can help their children to identify those things? Or because for many, it's not until very late in life that they might discover something that they're good at and that makes them feel better about themselves, and even opens up a career path.
Yeah, that's another good question. I think it's very child specific, situation specific, because it's hard to know, what they're going to be great at. But I think that comes with open mindedness. I think we need to be open that what we consider success might not be what's going to be successful for them. And I go back to the example of college or university. I think a lot of people when we were growing up, parents that came or grandparents that came from other places, like they wanted us to get a good education and go to a top college and have the best grades. And I think that's changed a lot. Not that academics has gone away or that it's important, but I think people are finding that less important now, and life skills being maybe, having more value to that than not just getting into Harvard. I think it's fine if you want to go to Harvard, it's a great school, but that's not the end goal for everybody anymore. And so I think it comes back to listening to our kids, being open to letting them try new things, having an open mind to the things that maybe we wouldn't think are so important, but maybe for them it could be, and praise their effort. I mean, praise their effort, not perfection. I think that comes in with self-esteem. You don't have to be perfect at things, but if you're praising and supporting their work and their hard work as opposed to getting it right all the time, I think that really helps them to move forward and not to worry just about the grade, but about the effort towards things. Just like if it's, music, they're not going to get it right the first time. They're not going to be Beethoven the first time they play a piano, but you're praising their effort of trying, sticking to it, working through it, and trying to give them a boundary of like, okay, let's keep them involved in the thing for a little bit and make sure that they are interested or not interested, but don't force them to do it. But at the same time, don't let them give up too soon. Praise their effort and their hard work. And I think that really helps, and celebrate their mistakes, like celebrate it as lessons. I think we don't want to foster a need for perfection. We want to foster hard work.
Truly, and I think a move toward more praise and less harsh judgment can't hurt. And if that's a part of gentle parenting, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. On another note, Dr. Warsh, you've spoken about the importance of parents looking after themselves, so I wonder if you have any general tips on how can parents foster their own resilience.
Yeah, my always general advice is what we talked about a little bit earlier, is like you have to focus on yourself a little bit. You cannot put all your focus on your kids. It's great that you put a lot of focus on your kids. That's wonderful parenting, but it can't come at your own expense of your own health and your own mental health. And you have to be a part of that equation. If you're not doing okay, then you're not going to be able to be the best parent. So take the time for yourself. It's okay to be slightly selfish every now and again. Like, it's okay to go hang out with your friends. It's okay to read a book. It's okay to go to the bathroom. Like, these are things that you have to work in as best as you can for your own mental health. Being miserable doesn't help your kids. And I think that, we want to do what we can for them, but we also have to focus on ourselves too. So I think that's one big piece. And the other one we did talk about is like trusting yourself, trust that you could do this. Try to minimize that stress level a little bit, that you have to be perfect, or there is something that's perfect when it comes to parenting. There is no such thing. And you do figure it out, and you will figure it out. And we figure it out as we go. You don't know what to do. You shouldn't know what to do. You won't know what to do next because your kids are going to be different. No textbook tells you exactly how to parent, and the world keeps changing. And so we have to kind of manage that and figure it out as we go. And that's what parents do and have always done. You figure out what's best for your kid based on the situation. And if something isn't exactly best, then you just change it, and that's okay.
Don't aim for perfection, and make sure to get bathroom breaks in. I think.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Warsh, for some very well-rounded advice on how parents can foster resilience in their kids and also look after their own well-being. I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you.
So perhaps the time of children en masse freely cycling across towns and even state lines to find the next adventure has largely passed. For now. Even so, the opportunities for building kids' resilience are myriad. And according to Dr. Warsh, they start with you as parents looking after your own health and well-being and trusting your own parental judgment. After all, if you've survived this far as a parent and you found your way to this video, then you must have some order of intuition in play. If you have found this video helpful, please go ahead and click that share arrow below and send it on to someone in your life who stands to benefit from it. Up next, my talk with psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen on the dopamine cause of ADHD and how it can naturally be treated. The link to that video is in the comments and description below. Also there, find the link to Dr. Warsh's new book, Between a Shot and a Hard Place, Tackling Difficult Vaccine Questions with Balance, Data, and Clarity. It's been great to be with you. I'm Brendon Fallon, and this is Vital Signs.